Greetings from the Republic of Panama. I'm Ray Cabanas, a graduate student at FHU's campus in the City of Knowledge next to the Panama Canal. My presentation today pertains to the role of non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, in disasters. You see my agenda here. I'll start with a look at what NGOs are. Then we'll turn our attention to the core of this briefing, their role in disasters. Finally, I'll discuss NGO-military relations because it is increasingly common to see military forces engaged in disaster relief alongside NGOs. The term non-governmental organization was brought into common usage by the United Nations, which included that term in Article 71 of its charter. So what is an NGO today? Well, in disaster management, an NGO is commonly defined as a nonprofit, civilian-based and staffed organization that depends on outside sources of funding and supplies to carry out a humanitarian-based mission. Each NGO typically has two defining characteristics. One, common background for its members, example medical, and two, a defined mission which guides its actions. As individual organizations, they tend to perform a limited number of tasks within a single functional area, but collectively, they cover all aspects of disaster mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. You may also hear terms such as quasi-governmental organization and quasi-non-governmental organization. These are hybrid organizations that have at least some association to a governmental agency or non-governmental organization. The American Red Cross is an example of a quasi-non-governmental organization, in part because it has U.S. military and other governmental officials on its governing board. So now let's take a look at what NGOs do in disasters. To begin with, their overall goal is to reduce victims' pain and suffering. How they do this depends on their organizational mission and skill sets. This slide breaks down this overall goal into four general goals. On the next two slides, you'll see specific functional areas in which NGOs can support disaster management. I want to point out that governments usually provide the greatest amount of support to pre-disaster activities, such as mitigation and preparedness, but NGOs can play a very large role in disaster response and recovery. And slide 2 on disaster-related functional areas. An NGO's strength is that they can quickly deploy. Many NGOs have pre-established teams and equipment packages on standby. In an international context, NGOs may already have an established presence in the country, so they have institutional knowledge of local customs, language, and other features of the operational environment in order to tailor their response to the particular area and disaster. This slide depicts funding sources that NGOs may tap into. Except for larger, more established NGOs, funding on hand usually only covers the first few weeks of operations in a disaster. Therefore, they either generate additional funding or have to cease operations. Many NGOs, however, maintain long-term relationships with donors to quickly mobilize resources. Historically, NGOs resisted efforts to coordinate their activities. This has changed because they have come to realize the benefits of coordinating their actions. Depending on the disaster, NGOs may use different locations and mechanisms to coordinate their activities. This slide shows some examples. Now let's turn our attention to the final topic, NGO military cooperation. NGOs have historically resisted working with military forces, but over time and through experience, they have learned that military forces can provide them with specialized technical and logistical assistance. In turn, the military has come to recognize the contributions that NGOs can provide in a disaster scenario. Besides their direct role in disaster relief, NGOs can provide the assistance and support to the military depicted on this slide. NGO workers may be more trusted by victims, for example, so their personal interactions may facilitate accurate local needs assessments and status reports. NGOs also have the training to address less tangible needs, such as mental health. An example of NGO military synergy may be a temporary lodging camp. The military is best able to build it quickly, and NGOs are better at running it. Finally, my references are depicted on this slide. I hope that this presentation has been informative, and I look forward to your comments and questions on the discussion board. This is Ray Cabanas, signing out.